Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in to episode 34 of the Fourth String Sports Podcast. This is our last team preview. We've made it through all 32 teams. Today, we are talking about the Washington football team, which is still so fucking funny to say. We're also going to be talking about the NBA. We're going to be talking about some updates in college football with both the Big Ten and some massive player opt-outs. And what's going on with the NFL's running back situation with some talks of Alvin Kamara possibly being traded if a contract extension isn't reached, and the cutting of Leonard Fournette. We have TJ joining us again today. We're very thankful that he was able to make it, and his Tampa Bay Lightning hockey team won a game, which is great. We're also extensively going to be talking about the NBA playoffs. We're already through 2 games of Raptors Celtics. We had the first Buck Heat game in the Eastern Conference semis. And then we have Game 7 of Jazz Nuggets going on right now, and we're going to get a Game 7 of Thunder Rockets as well. So the West is still not solidified. Those teams are on a very long break right now, the Clippers and the Lakers waiting for those games. We appreciate everybody for tuning in. You can follow us on everything on Facebook, Twitter, Spotify, SoundCloud, Reddit, YouTube, the whole 9 yards. And you guys can email us at fourthstringsp@gmail.com. That's FOURTH stringsp@gmail.com. So, gentlemen, let's get started here. So just some quick updates, quick update there. We talked about the Big Ten on the last episode eyeing a possible Thanksgiving start. Well, that has now been moved up. The Big Ten is now eyeing a start to the football season of October 10th. And one thing to keep in mind is that if the Big Ten does that, they could feasibly have teams eligible for bowl season if they play that 8-week or even a 9-week schedule without any buys in there. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. Do you guys think that the Big Ten start by October 10th is something reasonable?
Define reasonable.
Do you think it could realistically happen?
I think it could. I mean, shit, the President of the United States is trying to make it happen. So I think if Kevin Warren's backed by the President, he could probably make it happen. And, the parents and players want to make it happen. So I don't see what's going to get in their way except Kevin Warren.
Fair.
No, I honestly think it's because Donald Trump wants it to happen that it's not going to happen, honestly. And I mean, another thing, too, is that what they said, like they've come out and said multiple times that they're not going to change their mind on it. And then we get something like they're looking at Thanksgiving or they're looking at October 10th. We're getting and I mean, they've said that it will take like either quicker testing, which the NBA has developed, or just like better contact tracing, which again, we don't know if there's any improvements in that. I honestly think that it's going to be until they see how the NFL is able to handle it, how some of the SEC and other conferences are able to handle it. Then I think we'll get a clear picture about whether or not we have Big Ten football in the fall. But until then, I think that we're still looking at January, in my opinion. That's the closest we're going to have it.
Fair. I mean, I definitely think that it's reasonable, and I think that the October 10th start date would give the Big Ten enough time to let teams start to practice and also be able to monitor how the SEC, ACC, and Big 12 are handling it. Because by then, those conferences would be 4 or 5 games into their schedule. So they would be able to take a look at it and see, okay, so SEC is handling this fine, ACC is handling this fine. This is reasonably something we could do. Let's also, while we're sticking with college football, give a quick shout out here to the reigning national champion LSU Tigers, who have now had up to 10 players opt out due to COVID, as well as they're, as of right now, only going to be returning 5 players from the national championship team last year to the team this year, either because of opt-outs or the amount of people who entered the draft. And the big name that is opting out is Jamar Chase, a guy who probable top 10 pick in the NFL.
Top 5.
Depending on the needs and everything,
yeah.
For sure a top 10. Great wide receiver, choosing not to play. That's a big hit for LSU. I mean, we were all really curious to see how LSU would bounce back, and now this team looks like they may be lucky to go 500 with the amount of guys that they're not returning this year.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting situation. I don't think Coach O handled it pretty well. Because, I mean, before the opt-outs happened, we got news that a whole position group had tested positive for COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And that can't happen. I mean, if you're trying to have a full, season and a postseason, and before that's even happened, the whole position group's out, Yeah, if I was a player for Coach O, I would opt out too, because obviously he's not going to handle it the right way. He's not going to keep me safe, and especially a Jamar Chase, where top 10 guaranteed next year. I don't have to lift a finger this season, so why even play? So yeah, this could make them look like a 1-year wonder.
See, and I don't think they're a 1-year wonder. I think that this whole situation just makes things worse for them, honestly, because LSU is showing under Coach O that they're a good team and that they compete in the SEC, which is what we need. I will say that this is concerning as a person that follows LSU football, as a person that genuinely likes them as a team. This is concerning. So it's just like I agree with Mitch. I think that Coach O hasn't handled this the best because he is one of the loudest coaches about we need football. We need football. These players need football. I need football. The country needs football. All of this. And to have 10 opt-outs, multiple transfers. And again, that could just be because these guys are super talented and they don't want to risk getting a disease or an injury when they are guaranteed first or early second round pick. Because that could be too, because there's the freshman cornerbacks right now from last year that are the two of the best corner duos in the country that I'm guarantee if they were another year up, they would opt out too, because then they could go in, but they can't. So I think it's a mixture between both Coach O not handling the situation and how many concentrate on that national starters on that national championship team.
Yeah, I agree. And I also, speaking of the whole COVID situation, I want to give a shout out to actually the NFL. So the NFL did 58,000 tests over an 8-day period, August 21st to August 29th, and had 10 positive cases for COVID come back, 4 players, 6 personnel. Those are for sure positive. That is actually astronomical. I mean, you test nearly 60,000 tests. And only to have 10 cases, that's awesome. So the NFL seems to have their crap together when at least it comes to testing. So speaking of the NFL, let's just dive in really quick to the whole halfback situation here. So Leonard Fournette, former number 4 overall pick, completes the trend of the Jacksonville Jaguars, who have now had their last, I think, 9 first-round picks, are no longer on the team. He was released by the Jacksonville Jaguars after Doug Marrone and the Jaguars attempted to trade him, couldn't get any value back for him. Is this more of a reflection on the Jaguars attempting to do a rebuild or on Leonard Fournette as a player? Remember, he had some massive issues with Tom Coughlin. Tom Coughlin called him out for missing team meetings, for sitting on the sidelines, for not paying attention. His production really took a massive hit after that outstanding 2017 season where he helped the Jaguars get to the AFC Championship game. Is this, if you're an NFL team, are you more worried about Leonard Fournette as a player or Leonard Fournette as a teammate?
I guess a little bit of both. To me, Leonard Fournette hasn't lived up to his draft position and what he was expected to be. Because remember, when he was in college, he was like the biggest name, and he was looking like he could be what Saquon Barkley has become. And in Jacksonville, he hasn't really lived up to it. I mean, he's gotten to himself to be a good back, but he's not like an Ezekiel Elliott or anything like that. So I think teams are going to be interested to see if Jacksonville was holding him back from living that potential or if he just doesn't have it. And then obviously to see if all the issues that he had off the field was just because of Tom Coughlin, or that's just the person he's going to be. And maybe a new environment, he'll be, knows in the playbook, hit the ground running, that kind of stuff. So I think it's a combination.
Well, yeah, and I mean, news is coming out that Tom Coughlin was probably the worst thing that could have happened to the Jacksonville Jaguars. I mean, he's being sued.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
He's getting sued by the NFLPA for, like, mistreating players. So there's that too. So I think Tom Coughlin had more to do with this. I do think that he just didn't like the organization. I don't think he felt like he was treated the right way. Which
is a running theme for the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Yeah. I mean, he had some injury problems too. So I think that doesn't help. I mean, and again, I think being the 4th overall pick, that's not something he could control. That he didn't make that choice. Jacksonville made that choice. And when you put that 1st round pick, number 4 overall, next to his name, the amount of pressure and expectations for you go skyrocket. So if like he had been drafted in the second round or in the third round, people wouldn't have the same expectations. Because if he was drafted in the second or third round, people would be fine with it because when he's played, he's been productive. He's been doing good things. He's just not lived up to a first round, fourth overall expectations. And I don't blame Leonard for that because he was, from all accounts, being mistreated and he had injury problems. So I feel like he'll do good with whatever organization decides to pick him up.
A big thing that, because I've been following this as well, because I've got a friend who is a huge Jacksonville fan, and then I got a friend who's a big Texan fan. So I'm in between their rivalry all the time. And so I kind of wanted to look into this, and going off of the whole behind-the-scenes Jaguar kind of drama that's going on, I looked up the article on ESPN about the actual trade, and it was stated that he was released because of his poor performance during it was related to this. This is what sprung the release in the first place, but the training camp, they weren't impressed with what he was doing on the field. And that's one sentence, but then after that, they mentioned his suspension. He drew ire from management towards his attitude and behavior, and the fact that he was deactivated for another game by a rookie. So it's interesting that they bring up his play, and then all of a sudden they go into this big thing about his attitude. So I think there really was a big disconnect between the higher ups in Jacksonville and then like Leonard himself.
Yeah, and honestly, I can't fault him for being the number 4 overall pick because coming out of college, he was worth the number 4 overall pick, the same way that Saquon was, right? What I can fault him for is 3 seasons in Jacksonville. The first 2 seasons averaged less than 4 yards a carry. Last season, he barely broke that, 4.3 yards a carry. Right now, if you want to talk about premier NFL backs, you're talking about 5+ yards per carry. Yeah. He's not even close to that. 9 touchdowns his rookie season, 5 his sophomore season. Now, he only played in 8 games, but still had 5 touchdowns. And then last year, played 15 games, only had 3 touchdowns. He broke 1,000 yards, but when you break 1,000 yards at 4 yards a carry, that's just ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And then if you take that next to a guy like, let's take Aaron Jones, right? Aaron Jones for the Packers last season. So if you look at him, Aaron Jones was a 5th-round draft pick coming out of UTEP, okay? Aaron Jones, almost the same amount of carries, 236 for Aaron Jones last year compared to 265 for Leonard Fournette. So Fournette had 30 more carries than Aaron Jones did. Aaron Jones had 1,048 yards, but averaged 4.6 yards per carry and had 16 just rushing touchdowns. So if you average a little amount of yards, that's okay, as long as you're putting the ball in the end zone, right? That's how LeGarrette Blount made his entire career.
Yeah.
Okay? But Leonard Fournette, for health reasons, for personal reasons, for team conduct reasons, couldn't get on the field. And when he got on the field, he couldn't produce on the field. And sure, Jacksonville is a dog shit organization. Like, let's not mince words when it comes to that. Dog shit organization. But his production hasn't lived up to what they expected of him. I think it's too early to call him a bust, don't get me wrong. Hopefully he can get to a team that is a little bit more well-rounded. But his production has not lived up to what they expected out of Leonard Fournette coming out of college.
But Brady, the fact that he's getting even 4 yards to carry behind that offensive line just shows you how talented he is. Because if you look at the premier backs in the NFL, you're looking at, like, even putting Aaron Jones, who I don't consider a premier back in the NFL, but he did really, really well last year. But, like, we're looking at those halfbacks that are performing the best within the league. Ezekiel Elliott, Saquon, I can't put Saquon there. Ezekiel Elliott, I mean, even Miles Sanders, who performed really well last year. Aaron Jones from last year. Dalvin Cook.
Sure.
Todd Gurley when he had his amazing season. Those aren't just because their running backs are very talented, because they are. They're also all running behind amazing offensive lines.
Not Dalvin Cook.
Dalvin Cook had the Minnesota has
line is shit.
Minnesota has a better
offensive line. It's better than Jacksonville. I'll give you that, but
it's better than Jacksonville.
At the same
Okay.
time, I will seed Dalvin Cook. I'll seed Austin Eckler and Melvin Gordon for the Chargers, who had a dog shit offensive line.
No, I'll give you that. I
will seed Saquon Barkley, right? Giants
yeah.
have one of the worst offensive lines. There's players who can absolutely produce behind a terrible offensive line.
And he still rushed for 1,000 yards.
But he even his rookie season, right? 2017, Jacksonville's offensive line, based off PFF, was top 5. He still averaged 3.9 yards per carry.
Okay, I'll give you that.
Unfortunately, it's inexcusable. Jacksonville's offensive line has gotten worse, no doubt about that, right? Absolutely no doubt about that. But it's not the worst offensive line in the NFL, and yet you see other halfbacks produce just as equally, if not better, than Leonard Fournette did. So hopefully some team will pick him up. But now we got to move on to the other halfback now, moving from the AFC South to the NFC South, and that goes to Alvin Kamara. Alvin Kamara, if I'm not mistaken, was a 4th or a 5th round draft pick for the Saints?
Something like that.
So the complete opposite of Dalvin Cook, and yet Alvin Kamara has now missed 3 team practices, holding out on the team in response to trying to get a contract extension. The Saints are open to trading him, quote unquote, open to trading him, but they want a first-round pick back. Do we realistically think the Saints would trade Alvin Kamara? For me, I think it's absolutely no. I think what the Saints are doing is that they said we're open to trading him so that they could almost scare him into contract talks, so that they can almost go to him and go, here's the contract we're going to give you. Otherwise, we're going to trade you to some dog shit team, right, for a first-round pick, to whatever team would give him a first-round pick. Because I think Alvin Kamara doesn't want to go to a team like, let's say, Jacksonville, or a team like, let's say, maybe Houston right now that has a terrible offensive line that maybe won't utilize him. And I think he'd rather stay in New Orleans for maybe a little bit less money. So the question is, do we realistically think the Saints would trade Alvin Kamara?
I think they might. I mean, shit, if you're not going to give your star running back his money, but you're going to give Taysom Hill $21 million guaranteed or whatever shit that is for a third-string quarterback who's probably not even going to be your first string at all. I mean, shit, I could see them making a terrible decision like that and trading Alvin Kamara away. And the whole of, like, him being scared, he shouldn't be. I mean, he has the more leverage and stuff. If they get rid of him, who are they going to replace him with, honestly?
Don't they still have Latavius Murray?
Yep.
Yeah, but
you're right. He's not Alvin Kamara, but
yeah,
Latavius Murray took a lot of snaps last year because Alvin Kamara had a bad year last year.
Yeah, but it's not like he's going to be scared like, oh, nobody else is going to give me my money. Yeah, if he leaves, like all 31 teams would give him that kind of money, or at least more than what New Orleans, I guess, is going to be offering him. So yeah, I could see them trading him.
I don't think it's going to happen, honestly, because, I mean, some of the teams that are in the most need of a running back are either within the conference or within the division. There's been talks about Tampa Bay, but I don't think he's going to Tampa Bay because why would they give Tom Brady a weapon like Alvin Kamara? It's what happens before these kinds of talks, honestly. It's Alvin Kamara is sitting out and to get leverage, and the Saints are doing their part. They're doing leverage. I mean, there's been talks about New England or some of the other AFC East teams trading for him. I could see New England doing it. That's what they did with Brandon Cooks. They traded a first rounder for a guy and then converted it had a really good season with him and then converted it into something else. We'll just have to see, because with every running back holdout this offseason, the running back gave in at some point or another. With almost every contract holdout, they've either like Melvin Ingram got their guaranteed money, got their contract, or the person gave in, like Dalvin Cook. So I don't see him being traded away, especially because, like Brady said, he is the key to a lot of their success.
Yeah, and the one team that pops in my mind that would be perfect for Alvin Kamara is a team that doesn't have a first-round pick because they sent it to Jacksonville, and that's the Los Angeles Rams. I think the Rams would be a perfect fit for Alvin Kamara.
You'd do 2022.
I mean, yeah, technically, but I don't know if the Saints would be willing to give a first-round pick or receive a first-round pick for next year in that situation. So TJ's been awfully quiet, so let's finally move on to our NBA segment here. So talking about the NBA, we're going to start out on the Eastern Conference here. So we've had one game of Bucks Heat. Heat won game one, I think 115 to 104, if I'm not mistaken. We just had game two of Raptors Celtics go final. Celtics won, I think 102 to 99 game two. So they're up 2-0 in the series. Which team are we more worried about at this point? The Milwaukee Bucks or the Toronto Raptors? Now again, Toronto's had 2 games, the Bucks have had 1. We still are going to kind of wait to see here. But if you're a fan of either of those teams or you're the coach of either of those teams, which team are you more worried about, the Bucks or the Raptors right now?
I would have to say the Raptors. I mean, I have to eat my words about how that series is playing out right now. I thought it would be like, a Game 7 kind of series, and I had the Raptors winning, but I don't know. Celtics are looking like they're going to make me eat my words. And as Skylar likes to point out, Nick Nurse is an amazing coach, and, they basically got everybody from their championship run, and the Celtics are just kind of having their way with him. And
I'm going to interrupt you there for a minute, but that last play, the fucking Raptors had a timeout left and 5 seconds. Van Vliet got the ball up court with more than 3.5 seconds left. They could have called a timeout and set up a play, and they didn't. And I have no idea why Nurse didn't call a timeout there. Like, what's better, to try to do an inbound pass off a timeout to hit a three, or to let Van Vliet hit a 29-foot high arcer while you still had a timeout? Like, that made absolutely no sense for the quote-unquote coach of the year.
But there's a lot of things that are happening within this series that are out of Nick Nurse's control. I mean, you have in the first game.
You're right, but you are right. But what I'll say is one of the main reasons why the Celtics were able to run away with game one is because, first off, Raptors had horrible turnover trouble within that game. They couldn't convert within the transition. They weren't able to score at all throughout transition. And the Celtics were turning the ball over and then stealing the ball from the Raptors and scoring off of like a double turnover situation. That's happened in both games. Also, the Raptors have been in horrible foul trouble. I think within the first quarter of game one, Pascal Siakam had 3 fouls. Yeah, and Gasol fouled out with about 4 minutes left in the game.
So what I'll say is, like, yes, there are things within Nick Nurse's control that he can do and should do in order to give the Raptors the chance to win. To answer Brady's question, if I'm a Raptors fan, I'm much more worried because the Celtics have had the Raptors number the entire season. And the Celtics, I will say, in game 2 played dog shit. They were turning the ball over. They weren't scoring that much. It's 102 to 99. Like, that's not a high scoring game at all. Marcus Smart hit 5 3-pointers in the fourth quarter. Like, Marcus Smart shouldn't be able to do that. He's not that kind of scorer. And if Jason Tatum didn't score until I think like 6 minutes left in the fourth quarter, like, he had been silent the entire fourth quarter. And the Celtics came back and won that game. So, like, if I'm a Raptors fan, I'm much more worried. I mean, yeah, the Bucks let Jimmy Butler go off, but the Bucks are, again, like we all talked about in the last episode, the Bucks have one of the worst 3-point defenses in the league. And Jimmy Butler, in the idea that Jimmy Butler was going to shoot that many jump shots, nobody would have thought that.
Well, I mean, so let's talk then about Bucks Heat just a little bit, because the Heat beat the Bucks kind of at their own game. It was pretty much all interior, right? Jimmy Butler can't shoot a 3 to save his life. Like, I think this season, I think he's a 22% 3-point shooter. Duncan Robinson and Tyler Hero were both pretty much silent. Goran Dragic had a great game. But let's just talk about something the media is talking about all the time. Why didn't Giannis cover Jimmy Butler? So TJ, let me ask you that. Why didn't Giannis cover Jimmy Butler when that game was on the line there?
I think it's kind of interesting because the big argument that I'm seeing on Twitter is that this is the defensive player of the year, so why aren't you letting the defensive player of the year guard the best player on the other team? And I think it was just a part of the whole momentum of the game. Jimmy Butler really was beating anybody that was guarding him, so it doesn't really matter if you put Giannis up there or Middleton or even like DiVincenzo, like the way that Butler was playing that whole game, like he was knocking down everything. So I really don't think there is much argument that you can do to say, well, Giannis should have guarded him, otherwise it would have been a different ending to that game. I really don't think so, because just the way that Butler was playing throughout the whole game, it's not like he got hot in one quarter and that's why he's got 40 points. He was hot the whole game. And there was a post that came out and Butler said, like, just give me the ball. And his teammates were like, all right, like he's feeling himself today. So I don't think it really mattered who was guarding Butler at that point. But like, just to build off of that, how I was saying, how for the prediction of the series, looking at the stat line, like the people who I wanted to have a huge impact on the series for the Bucks, the real playoff P, Pat Connaughton only had 2 points, 6 boards, but DiVincenzo had 1 point. Korver had 11, which is nice.
Middleton had a good game, which was like one of his first good games.
Yeah, but he went 2 and 9 in the fourth quarter. That's what killed him.
Well, and I think. Oh, go ahead, TJ. Sorry.
Oh no, it's all good. I was just gonna say Brook scoring 24 was kind of a surprise, but you can't have, Middleton and Lopez being your leading scorers every night. Like Giannis getting 18, 10, and 9 is insane, but you got to have more production off the bench. Yeah,
free throw line or something like that.
Well, yeah. No,
airballing.
Well, yeah, like put it into consideration. I mean, the Bucks shot better from beyond the 3-point line than the Heat did, but they also shot 50% from the free throw line. Like that's inexcusable. You can't win a game if you're only going to make one out of every 2 shots from the free throw line, especially how many times they were fouled. Like,
you're right, but what I would say to that is that this was almost like a shot for shot remake of Game 1 versus the Magic, right? Bucks shot pretty well, couldn't hit a free throw. Magic had a lot more momentum. So I'm not really as worried.
But Brady, this isn't the Magic. This is the Heat, who are a much better team.
You're absolutely right. But if you look at it, it's again almost a shot for shot remake of Bucks Celtics Game 1 last year. Also,
and Heat are still a better team than that Celtics team.
But I think Brady brought up a great point yesterday, saying like the Heat almost had a whole week to prepare for the Bucks, where the Bucks have day coming off.
That still shouldn't excuse Giannis only scoring 18 or only shooting 50% from the free throw line.
You're right.
That doesn't excuse those things, because if Giannis scores more points and they shoot better from the free throw line, they win the game.
You're absolutely right, and that's what the point that we're making is that the Heat knew they were going to play the Bucks for a week before the Bucks could even begin to prepare for the Heat, right?
So they
I think they knew it before that series was over.
Yeah, and part of that was, in all honesty, the I'm not going to say the Bucks' fault, but the Bucks' doing for sitting out the original Game 5 on Wednesday, right? So that was a huge portion of it. But what I'm saying is that now we're going even and even here. And the other thing you have to remember is who didn't play for the Bucks? Eric Bledsoe, right? And while do I think Eric Bledsoe was going to be a playoff changer? Absolutely not. But Eric Bledsoe, first team all defense, very easily could have switched over to Jimmy Butler, and maybe that's a different game. Eric Bledsoe is fantastic in guarding a drive the way that Butler does.
But Brady, that's the entire Bucks defense. I guarantee that there were 2 things that Coach Bud was working on today in practice. Practice was interior defense and shooting from the free throw line, because they let up 30 points by the middle of the third quarter, which they don't do.
You're right. You're absolutely right, and that's stuff they have to work on. But the Heat would still have to beat the Bucks 3 more times that exact same way.
No, I will give that to you. But what I'm saying is that it wasn't like the Heat were like, okay, we have the Bucks to play. So how are we know what the Bucks' weakness is. Shoot from the 3-point line. It wasn't like they just knocked down a bunch of threes. They beat the Bucks at what the Bucks are best at.
You're right. But why do you think they were able to take advantage of that? Part of me thinks that it was because they had a week to prepare versus the Bucks. And as a team, the Heat were absolutely coached perfectly. Eric Spoelstra did a great job, right? He saw where the Heat had the opportunity to take advantage. The Bucks had 1 day to prepare for the Heat. So all they could prepare for was to guard the 3-point line, which they did really well in that game, by the way. And when you're guarding the 3-point line, you leave yourself open for the interior rush. What I want to get back to is the whole Giannis versus Jimmy Butler thing. Last year, when Rudy Gobert was defensive MVP, nobody talked about, well, he should be covering James Harden, because they're 2 completely different players. Like Jimmy Butler plays shooting guard and sometimes small forward. Giannis is power forward and center. He almost never goes up to small forward, let alone shooting guard. So if you were to have thrown Giannis on Jimmy Butler, well, what do you leave open then? Then you have guys like Bam Adebayo who are going to be covered by Chris Middleton or Pat Connaughton or Dante DiVincenzo or
got it.
all those guys. So there was really no matchup in which Giannis can cover Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler had a great game. No doubt about that. Do I think he's going to be able to put up 3 more 40-point games? No, probably not. I'm definitely more worried about the Raptors. A, their three-point shooting has been abysmal these first 2 games against the Celtics. B, Brad Stevens has absolutely outcoached Nick Nurse. I mean, there's really no doubt about that. The Celtics look much more disciplined. They look much more well-rounded. They look just hungrier for this game than the Raptors do. And coming out of the opening series against the Nets, I wouldn't have said that because the Raptors bench put up 100 points and they dominated the Nets. And I was like, all right, this Raptors team is probably going to have a pretty easy walk to the conference finals. And I'm eating my own words for that because the Celtics are playing a lot better sans Gordon Hayward than I really expected them to.
Well,
I think the scary thing is that Kemba's not even playing Kemba right now.
No,
he's still, and they're still doing great.
He didn't play Kemba game 2. He was more like Kemba game 1. The thing that I think should be worrying everybody in the East is that Robert Williams is playing lights out these last 2 games. He has been playing and again, that's not like he's scoring 20 and getting 10 off the backboard. He's just producing on both the offense and defensive line. I mean, he was getting offensive rebounds, putting them back up. He scored 10 points in the first quarter like that. When the Raptors were on a run, Robert Williams was single-handedly keeping them in the game. It's again, I've said what I had to say about Raptors Celtics. Celtics.
Go ahead, T.
I just want to mention the impact that Marcus Smart's having because I don't know how many people wrote him off as a pivotal factor in this series entirely, but him coming in and scoring 19 points in that game yesterday is kind of big because he's known as being a defensive high energy guy. And ever since in the bubble, he's become an offensive option for them. And now going out there scoring 19 points, I just think he's not getting as much as I don't think he's a flopper. So I just don't like him. He's an actress out there, but his intensity and his ability to put, the ball in the hoop right now is just something that isn't really focused on because you got Tatum scoring 34 and then you got the talk of Kemba not being his Kemba self. And I think it's just overshadowing the fact that Marcus Smart's coming out here scoring 20 points a game in the biggest games of the year right now.
He hit 5 threes in the fourth quarter.
Who's going to think that?
I think that's a really great point because, we talked about, Gordon Hayward isn't going to be there, so who for the Celtics is going to pick up, right? Well, now we have to talk about for the Raptors. Pascal Siakam has played like dog shit the first 2 games. Like he's played like absolute crap. And I think Shaq put it best where he said Pascal Siakam isn't an all-star. He's an all-star because Kawhi left and someone had to be for the Raptors, but he's not an all-star. He's looked bad. He's looked sloppy. He can't make a shot, it seems, within 4 feet of the basket. He turned the ball over a bunch. So now the question has to be for the Raptors, if Pascal Siakam can't produce, who's going to be the next guy to produce? And the Raptors don't really have a guy to do that. Like Serge Ibaka was already filling in for Gasol because Gasol had massive foul trouble. So you can't expect a guy like Ibaka to pick up the slack for both of them. And Van Vliet played bad, and Lowry didn't play great. And OG Anunoby had a great game. I'll give him mad props for that. OG Anunoby was studly out there. But the rest of that team just didn't look good. So, I mean, I would –
Put in Drake.
But again, I don't think people realize how good of a defensive team the Celtics are.
You're absolutely right.
Because we have Marcus Smart, who's a first-team all-defensive player, hands down. Whether or not he flops, he's a first-team all-defensive player. I mean, he's the only guy in the league that can harass Joel Embiid and then take on Fred VanVleet within a week of each other. He's the only guy in the league that can do that. Jaylen Brown is becoming great defensively. Whether or not he'll get 3 or 4 fouls within a game, but he's taking on Pascal Siakam down in the post. Jason Tatum is long and athletic. Kemba is a pretty good perimeter defensive player. Robert Williams is becoming his own down by the paint. Like I think people overlook how good defensively this Celtics team is because they're so young. And they're just like, they're athletic. They're not good. They're just athletic. And that's just not true.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the two key stats that stuck out for me in game 2 here, the Celtics had 20 fouls, the Raptors had 19. The difference is Gasol and Anunoby had 11 of those 19. And that's your starting small forward and your center. And then on top of that, everybody else was evened out there, right? The Celtics had 20 fouls. Jaylen Brown had 4, Williams had 4. But the rest of the team, that's spread out really evenly. And then the Celtics, 15 of 38 from the three-point line. The Raptors, 11 of 40. Van Vliet went 3 of 12 alone. Gasol was 0 of 2. Pascal Siakam was 1 of 4. Lowry was 0 of 7. Like, this Raptors team is built on the three-point ball in a way that I don't think we've seen any other team be built. And that includes, like, Golden State, right? Because, Curry can still drive really well, and you still have Draymond Green on the down low. But this Raptors team is built on that three-point ball, and when your two best three-point shooters in Lowry and Van Vliet are a combined 3 of 19, you're not going to win a ball game. So there's a lot of work to be done here. And then we just hit halftime on Jazz versus the Nuggets game 7, and right now the Nuggets are up 50 to 36 at half. So I might have to eat my words. It looks like the Nuggets are going to come back down 3-1 in that series.
We got him, TJ. We got him.
Yep. Darn right we do.
You did, which means that the Nuggets will then move on to play the Clippers.
Another whole half of basketball.
Yeah, it's only halftime.
You're absolutely right. And who knows if Donovan Mitchell is going to show up and stuff. But there's a lot of guys that we can talk about have been serial underperformers here in the playoffs, right? Giannis, serial underperformer right now in the playoffs. Rudy Gobert.
What do you mean?
I mean, you just look at his games pretty much the whole playoffs, and there's none that are, with the exception of maybe like Game 3 against the Magic, none of them have really popped out at me as fantastic.
Yeah, but he's putting up the same kind of points as Kawhi and LeBron, though.
Correct, but you can look at the stats and say one thing, and you can watch the film and say another. I would say
Chris, not them. He's supposed to be like, he's Giannis. He's the MVP.
Yeah,
he's supposed to be better than that.
Chris Middleton had a great first 3 quarters against the Heat, and then fell off in the 4th, and then he had a pretty abysmal series against the Magic. Pascal Siakam we talked about, Rudy Gobert we talked about, Russell Westbrook in the 2 games he's been a part of has just not performed at all. I loved the memes that said Russell Westbrook is finally helping the Thunder get out of round 1 of the playoffs, which was great. So there's a lot of really serial underperformers that who knows, some teams may be looking for a rebuild that a lot quicker than we expected.
Well, if you watched the first 4 games of Rockets Thunder, you would have said the same thing about Chris Paul.
No, not the first 4 games. The first 2 games, yeah. But remember, the Thunder won the following 2.
Well, I'm just saying, it's like if you take snapshots of any of these series, you could be like, this guy's underperforming. Yeah. I mean, you can even put Joel Embiid in there too, because he definitely underperformed the Celtics.
I wouldn't put him on there. Yeah, I wouldn't put him on there because he was by himself. If Ben Simmons was there and they still played that way, okay, then maybe. But I can't put it on there when your fucking bench is a bunch of no names and Josh Richardson. Like it's bad.
Only if they had Boban.
If only they kept Boban and Tobias Harris. That's what screwed them over, was breaking up the best relationship the NBA had ever seen. And fucking breaking up Bobby and Toby, which was so good.
Should have never traded AI to Denver.
Let's also actually – so I wanted to talk about this with the Mavs being eliminated by the Clippers. Is Marcus Morris a dirty player? After stepping on Luka Doncic's ankle in Game 5, I think, and then slapping him – and it was an aggressive hit right across his face in Game 6 to get the technical. Is Marcus Morris a dirty player in the NBA?
Yeah, it seems like it. I mean, you could look at that first game and be like, okay, that's an accident. But if he's coming at you the same way in the second game, then, it doesn't take a lot to add up. And wasn't he kind of like that in the series last year against us as well, if I remember right?
He's a bitch.
I mean, yeah, he's kind of he. I wouldn't say that he's been a serial dirty player, but there's been a lot of moments where he's kind of been. There's been moments where you're like, all right, that was either unintentional and everything had to happen right, or he ran the whole court and just happened to step on Luka's ankle, right?
It's a lot of unintentionals.
Yeah, that's
it's not
exactly
us.
it. And that shit starts to pile up. It almost reminds me of like Grayson Allen at Duke with the amount of
Yeah.
times that he would just trip people. But, oh, I was falling. It was totally unintentional. I was falling. And then once you piece that shit together, you're like, okay, this guy has a history of doing stuff like this.
Which is really funny because he's been doing pretty well in the NBA, and we haven't heard anything about him tripping anybody.
Well, that's because
Because
he
he'll get his
just
ass
doesn't
kicked.
play. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait,
He'll
no,
get his
wait
ass
a minute.
kicked.
He's been playing. He's been playing
He doesn't.
more than people thought he would. But
Yeah, but he's not expected to put up 35 a game like he did.
oh
at
god,
Duke.
no. And I'll just say this: why go after Luka? He's like one of the most likable players in the NBA. Like, why go after him?
It's-
He's
It
in a
doesn't
fragile ego. And
Because he wants to be
himself.
relevant.
Exactly.
Well, no, but it's I've
Because
never
his
like.
twin is the better basketball player.
Mm.
No.
But just seeing how angry Luka was at him, I was just like,
Yeah.
I've never seen Luka.
Yeah, I would
that
too.
Pissed.
Oh, yeah.
He was ready to like cut a bitch. Like it
And,
was.
and mad props to actually Boban Marjanovic for basically like picking up Luka like you
Just
would like
holding
a
him.
frustrated kindergartner and just being like, we're already down Kristaps, we can't be down you. Like, I want to win this game. Like it was so funny to look at, but I mean Marcus Morris should honestly be ashamed of himself. So
This is not
let's
Donkey Kong
He
Soup.
obviously isn't by his comments.
yeah, right? Yeah, at least he's not Donkey Kong Soup. So let's move on to our what's list. So who picked the topic? Was it Skylar?
Me.
All right, so
All
Sky.
right, top 5 best young players in sports. So anybody they can't win a championship. So no championships. So you have
I think it's championships or like MVPs or something.
yeah,
What they-
championships
Yeah,
are
none of
MVP.
those.
Oh shit, I have to look at one of mine then.
I totally forgot this guy won last year.
Well, no, I just don't know if he won
Oh,
an
fair
MVP. I don't know. I know hasn't won a championship, but I don't know if he's won an MVP. I'll have to
All right.
double check.
All right. Brady's up
But
there?
yeah, so Brady goes. No championships, no MVPs. Go Brady.
All right, so number 5 on my list is one that's just super close to my heart. I'm going to put Jair Alexander on there, corner for the Packers. I think that if you look at Pro Football Focus, he's one of the best corners in the red zone. He's able to cover a lot of guys really well. He's obviously had moments where he's been burned. There's no doubt about that. But I think as a whole, he plays really well for a guy who's only going into now his 3rd year in the league. He forces turnovers in a way that I haven't seen a corner do in a really long time. He's really good at ISO. So Jair Alexander goes number 5 on my list. Number 4 on my list goes to Trae Young. If he was on any other team but Atlanta, he might be higher. Because what this guy does, I mean, nutmegging alone, basketball players, I think deserves to be on this list. But what he has been able to do in Atlanta has been absolutely fantastic. And I was a little down on him. I didn't think he was worth what he got drafted at. And I still think that it's a massive I still think that the Hawks made a massive issue or a massive
Blunder.
mistake by trading him for Luka Doncic. I really, really do. But he's number 4 on my list. Number 3 on my list was I actually had to flip 2 and 3 after the performance today. So number 3 on my list is going to go to the man himself, Fernando Tatis Jr., 21 years old. Even if this is a one-hit wonder, I love what this guy is doing right now. I think he's leading the league in home runs and RBIs and stolen bases. Like, he's just dominating the league. And he's making the Padres look like a way better team than I think anybody really expected him to look. And I also just love the hate that he's getting because he's a young player who's successful. So then the original number 3 on my list, who I had to move up after his performance today against the Raptors, is going to go to Jason Tatum. I have always loved Jason Tatum, even though I fucking hate Duke. I loved him at Duke. I like that he's a good old-fashioned St. Louis kid. His performance has been absolutely fantastic. He put up 34 points today. He's played really well in the playoffs, and if you look at really all the series of the playoffs he's played in, he's pretty much played really well. I remember fondly him as a rookie going up against LeBron and the Cavs and taking them to 7, and a large part of that was just how well that he played. And number 1 on my list, maybe it's a cheat, maybe it's not, it goes to Luka Doncic. I don't know how you could say any player besides Luka is maybe the best at their age at this point in the league. This kid in his 2nd season, his points per game went up, his rebounds went up, his assists went up. Really, the only thing he's got to work on is his 3-point shot. I love watching this kid play. His behind-the-back passes, his ability to deconstruct a defense is something I haven't seen from a young player in a long time. So that's my list. Luka goes number 1, even though they didn't win that first series. I mean, they gave everything they had against the Clippers, and Luka played fantastic.
Yeah, I like it. I like it.
Yeah, good list, solid list.
All
I
right.
had to,
So
I had to take number
I hate
3
it.
off my list because I double checked it. But go ahead.
wait,
Okay.
why do you hate it, TJ?
I just wanted to be the odd man out.
All right, so for my list at number 5, I have Vladimir Guerrero Jr. I think he's been a massive boon for the Toronto Blue Jays. He's kind of having a little bit of a down year, but I think he's going to be, the future for MLB. Number 4, I got to give it to Devin Booker. He put up a really good performance in the bubble. Only if his team played better during the regular season, I think he could have made the postseason very fun. And I hope he gets to a better team so we can see the full potential of him. Number 3, Donovan Mitchell. A guy who, was drafted and he's doing all right, but I think he really came into his own this postseason. I at least doubted him, obviously with the whole series and stuff, and he was able to carry the whole team when it looks like the odds were against him, and he's playing like a, future superstar for, right now. And then number 2, I got to give it to Luka, in his second season. Like you said, he's having like a Giannis kind of like effect where like the next season, everything just goes up across the board. And, if Kristaps doesn't get out, I think we're talking about them moving to the next round. And then my number 1, I got to give it to Fernando Tatis Jr. I don't think he's going to be like a one-year wonder. His first year, he was showing some real promise in the couple of games that he was allowed to play. And now that he's an official starter, he's showing what he's made of. And, with all the moves that the Padres just made at the trade deadline, I think he could be in a really great position to be a dark horse to win a finals in his like second year. So that's why he's at number 1 over Luka, just because he looks like he could win his ring sooner than Luka right now.
Fair. I completely forgot about Devin Booker because for me, he's been in the league for like 5 years now. And so
I thought he was like 26.
I did too. And then I'm like, oh shit, like I forget about the one and done in basketball.
Yeah.
Where you can basically start the season at 17 and then be in the draft by 18. Whereas the same with like Giannis, right? Like Giannis has been in the league like 8 years, but he's only like I think 26. You know.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, and Donovan too. I thought he was way older.
Oh yeah. But that's just basketball. So Skylar, your list.
I will totally admit I had Cody Bellinger on my list, and then I was like, I just looked it up. He won an MVP, so he's off the list now. Because I have to stick to my own rules. So number 5, Donovan Mitchell. If it wasn't for me having kicked Cody Bellinger, he wouldn't be on the list. But I put him on the list because just what he's done in these finals, single-handedly leading this like the Jazz team that nobody really thought could make a series with Denver competitive. We all said they were playing dog shit in the bubble, and they've proven us all wrong. Whether or not they win tonight, Donovan Mitchell is now an up-and-comer in the league, looking like he could be a perennial all-star if he keeps it up. Just a great player in general. Number 4, Christian McCaffrey. He's only 24.
No shit, really?
Yeah, he's only 24, and he is the best running back in the league. Maybe one of the best wide receivers in the league, and he's done it with a horrible team, inconsistent quarterback play, just a slew of problems were thrown at him, and he is still an all-pro running back. And if he wasn't playing running back, an all-pro wide receiver. So you have to give it to Christian McCaffrey. Number 3, Quentin Nelson, the only rookie to go all-pro on the offensive line, and he's done it back-to-back years. That's insane on an offensive line to be that young, that successful, and be the best player on a really talented Indianapolis O-line. Got to give the shout-out to the offensive lineman.
To the big uglies, man. And
Big ugly.
My biggest sports regret is that the one touchdown he scored got called back on a penalty because the keg stand celebration that he did with the other offensive lineman
was great.
Was the best thing I've ever seen in my life.
You know for a fact at the beginning of the season they're like, if any of us score a touchdown,
we're doing a keg stand, which is so great.
Number 2, Jason Tatum. Everybody after last year having an off year didn't think he was going to be back to Jason Tatum, but guy's crazy good. Scoring 33 or 4 times within these playoffs already, not to mention what he did in playoffs during his rookie year. Him and Jaylen Brown are the best young wing duo in the league. I think that the only duo that can probably rival them in just like sheer talent is Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, because the reason that they're as good as they are is the experience that they have. If these two stay together, the Celtics are looking at staying relevant and staying as a top 3 team in the East for the next couple of years to come. And then number 1, Luka Doncic. The guy's gonna win a ring sooner or later. He's becoming the face of the NBA. He's already one of the best European players we've had. It's just crazy. The only reason I didn't have Tatis on this list is because I forgot his name and then I couldn't find him. So. That was the only reason. I was like, who was the guy that TJ was talking about? Plays for the Padres. What's his name? Find him. So that's the only reason Tatis isn't on this list, because if I remembered him, he would have been 3 instead of Bellinger. But yeah, honorable mention to Tatis.
I feel like your Quentin Nelson pick is just to kiss Brady's ass.
It definitely is.
Quentin Nelson, because he's a rookie and he made the All-Pro team. Like that's insane.
I mean, I still appreciate the ass kissing. So, TJ, what's your list?
As a shock to absolutely nobody, this list is full of baseball and basketball players. So at number 5, we have Ja Morant. And in a season where it was just dominated by what Zion's going to do, Zion's impact, his injury. I mean, his injury was a bigger story than Ja coming in for the Grizzlies. And to come in and be basically the new face of that franchise, although the Grizzlies didn't have the season that they wanted, he basically carried that team up into a contention to be in the playoffs. And he's just exciting. I mean, this dude had one spotlight year in college, and all of a sudden he's a top 5 young guy in the league. So I just enjoy watching that guy. Number 4 is a teammate of Mitch's that he brought up, Bo Bichette for the Toronto Blue Jays. I think he's just – there's something about him. He's like a quiet but really good baseball player. Like, he gets a lot of notice on Twitter and all that, but what he's doing in Toronto, him and Guerrero Jr., yeah, those two are going to be a very scary duo once they get a couple more years of experience in. Number 3, I didn't really know if I liked this pick at first, but like going over his stats over the past few years, it's actually insane. Ronald Acuna Jr. Okay. He's super young, and he's already a part of the 40-40 club. This dude's stealing bases left and right. He's hit so many home runs that the Marlins got butthurt by that and hurt him, just to come back in the next game against Miami and hit a bomb off of him. Like, he's exciting for baseball in a time of baseball where it's just the sport is not the sport itself, but the MLB itself is under a lot of fire and it's kind of dying. So you like the people just full of excitement like Acuna. Number 2, Luka. I mean, what else can you say about it? It's not already been said. His regular season's insane. First playoff, he comes in and he's just carrying a Mavs team that nobody thought would be here, and all of a sudden they're putting up a shot against arguably the best team in the West, which is Lakers, but the Clippers are up there. And the number 1, the new GOAT, Fernando Tatis Jr. I love this guy. His drip, the way he plays, the way he doesn't care about people's feelings, and the fact that he's just really good. The fact that after he hurt the Rangers' feelings, he hit a home run, stealing a base up 10, and then the first home game he plays Cry Me a River as his walk-up song. Absolutely stellar. So he's just the most exciting thing in baseball. He's keeping baseball relevant, and so he's saving Rob Manfred's ass.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a running theme in your list with baseball players, is that they're saving baseball the way that baseball itself can't be saved, Yeah. Where and that's such the interesting thing about sports, is that you don't really watch sports to watch the game. You watch it to watch the players, right? Like, when Aaron Rodgers was hurt, I honestly couldn't give a fuck about the Packers because I knew we were going to lose, right? Yeah. With Tom Brady being gone in New England, unless you're a Patriots fan,
it's going to be really rough to watch those games.
Yeah, you really couldn't give a fuck about the Patriots.
You have Cam Newton. That'll be interesting.
When Jordan left the Bulls, even though Pippen was still there, who gave a fuck about the Bulls?
I did. Horse brains.
And you could even argue, when Shaq left the Lakers and it was just Kobe, a lot of people were like, well, who gives a fuck about the Lakers,
And then they started winning again, and then they're like,
true, yeah, you're right. And then those bandwagon
Kobe's not in his top 10.
Yeah, well,
But
exactly.
then Kobe leaves, and who cares about the Lakers then? And now LeBron's here.
Yeah, exactly. So
I still don't care about them.
it's kind of like, especially with baseball, has really taken the lead on that, where it's like people don't give a fuck about watching baseball as a sport. They give a fuck about watching Cody Bellinger and Fernando Tatis and Mike
Mitch
Trout
Trubisky.
and Christian Yelich and and Aaron Judge and guys like that. Yeah, there you go, Mitch. You know,
Nerd power.
so like that. I love your list there, TJ. That's pretty good. So I get to pick the next what's list. I am going with the 3 biggest what if in sports. So these what ifs could be literally anything. It could be what if the Seahawks had ran for it on 4th and 1. It could be what if Brett Favre never got traded from the Falcons. It
What if
could be
He never got hurt.
exactly, exactly. What if Jordan never came back from baseball? Or at the same time, what if Jordan never left for baseball in the first place? What if LeBron never went to South Beach? What if, what if Prince Fielder never left Milwaukee? What if Albert
What if his
Pujols
neck never broke?
Exactly. What if Albert Pujols never left the Cardinals? What if there's so many things that
What
you
if
can go
Kazam
with.
was actually good?
Exactly. What if Zack Snyder had been able to direct all of Justice League? So just anything in relation to sport.
Oh, okay.
But it's gonna be your biggest what ifs, and then a little bit of what you think the league would look like or the sport would look like had that what if actually gone through. So that's it. That's what it's going to be. I think this is going to be super interesting because there's such a plethora of topics across all sports that you could cover, and do just kind of that N if L type thing where you're like, what do we think the league would have looked like, type thing. So I think that's my next topic here. So So then with that, we're going to sign off to TJ here. We appreciate him being on. We're going to have TJ on in the future here.
Yep.
We're definitely not going to talk about hockey because I don't watch that shit. But he will be back for NBA as the NBA playoffs continue to heat up. We're going to have him back as we preview the Western Conference semis and we continue to get into the Eastern Conference. So, TJ, before you sign off, you got anything else you want to say?
Go Bolts.
Go
Says
Bolts.
nobody talks hockey. Go Bolts.
Yeah. I just really can't watch hockey, like unless it's the Stanley Cup. I've never been into hockey personally, so I can't watch.
It's so
unless it's the
stressful.
Stanley. I know.
Dude,
I know.
it's so. Look at my Twitter. It's so stressful.
I just wish more sports had a timeout box, like that hockey does. I love the
That'd be
naughty
so
kid
funny.
corner that they put him in.
It's so funny.
So, all right, well, TJ, we appreciate you being on the show. You have yourself a fantastic
Appreciate
night,
it,
bud.
You too, boys. See you soon.
Yeah.
So we appreciate TJ for joining us. We love having him on. We want to give him a big shout out and good
It's
luck.
okay.
Good luck at your home run derby. I know that you can whack them balls better than anybody on the field, baby. So now we're going to move on to our main team today, the team formerly known as the Redskins, now just the Washington football team, which let's take a moment to appreciate how fucking funny that still is, that they still – it seems like they've all but given up the team name thing. Because we just haven't heard anything about it, and that's so funny.
Well, they might even have a new owner, though.
True.
I was
The
listening to
NFL's
the
best anthem.
Yeah.
listening to the PFF football podcast, which is a funny podcast. People should listen to it sometimes.
Oh, it's great. I love it.
Listening to it, and they were talking about how they were previewing the NFC East, and they're like, "Can we talk about what a wonderful branding job this is by Washington? Because do you know how many people are going to buy their merchandise not being Washington fans, but buy it just for the meme? Because they could have just gone by like Washington, but no, they chose the Washington football team. You know how many people are going to buy their merchandise just for the meme of it? It's going to be hilarious.
I almost thought about buying a shirt just so that in 30 years it's worth something, because by then they would have changed the name and just be like, oh,
You
well,
hope so.
this was, yeah, we hope so. Unless they're
No,
out
they're
gonna
the
just,
Washington football team for now. Ha, never.
yeah, unless they're just going to adopt like a soccer name and just call themselves like the Washington Football Club type bullshit.
Yeah.
But
Nothing
let's
wrong
move.
with
Let's
that.
talk about them because they're our main team. They're our final team. We've technically talked about their entire season by covering everybody else, but this is our last team on our team previews. So Washington last year, an abysmal 3-13, somewhat forgiven. They fired Jay Gruden, the head coach, about 6 games into the season. Did not have Alex Smith. Thankfully, he's now back. Big shout out to Alex Smith for that. Dwayne Haskins, the rookie, had to step in. threw for 1,365 yards, had 7 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. Old man Adrian Peterson, 898 rushing yards, 5 rushing touchdowns, and the rookie standout, scary Terry McLaurin, 58 catches, 919 yards, and 7 touchdowns. They had some pretty big losses through trades and stuff. Ironically, though, their 2 biggest losses didn't play a snap for them last year. Trent Williams traded to the San Francisco 49ers. Jordan Reed was released by the team after not playing due to concussions, also went to the San Francisco 49ers. Other big losses, Case Keenum, who was the team's original starting quarterback, went to Cleveland. Quentin Dunbar went to Seattle, where then he got into some trouble. And the left guard, who started all 16 games for them, Eric Flowers, went down to Miami. Free agent pickups, not a ton, but some of note. Ronald Darby, they picked up the corner from Philadelphia. Thomas Davis, the former Carolina linebacker under Ron Rivera, the new head coach, joins Ron Rivera after a season stint with the Chargers. They pick up Kendall Fuller, who ironically they traded to Kansas City for Alex Smith. He gets brought back to Washington, the corner, and they pick up Carolina's quarterback from last year, Kyle Allen, also reunites with Ron Rivera out there in Washington. So anybody stand out in terms of free agent losses and pickups here, and how do you guys grade them?
I think the 2 biggest losses to me that are going to matter is Trent Williams, obviously, just because, when he's healthy, he's, a top 5 offensive tackle. And with an already shitty line that basically just, has Brandon Sheriff, it's going to hurt, and they really have no plan. And then a guy that I'm surprised you didn't talk about, because you've talked about him before, is Chris Thompson. The dude's a really –
Yeah, true. I did forget to write him down.
Yeah, I think he's been their most effective halfback the past couple of years, even though Adrian Peterson has put up some nice numbers. Just what he's able to do and how versatile he is, I think they're really going to miss that from that offense. And then the 4 games that stand out to me is I got to start with the head coach, Ron Rivera. I think they finally found the head coach they can have for the next decade or so. He'll bring in the right culture. He'll make the right decisions. This step in the right direction for this rebuild. I think getting Kendall Fuller and Ronald Darby to shore up that porous secondary with some really great moves. And then I think Peyton Barber could be a sneaky add just because, Adrian Peterson is someday is going to retire, even though it doesn't look like it. And behind him, with guys being arrested and kicked off the team, there really isn't much except for, hopefully a promising rookie. So I think that was a great pickup just because, he's not an all-world beater, but he's effective. So if I have to give their losses and gains an overall grade, I think I would have to give it a C+.
Well, I'm going to go in the same vein as Mitch. I'll go C+. I agree. Ronald Darby and Kendall Fuller didn't have the best years last year, at all. But they're both still young players that have produced well in the NFL. So I think Ron Rivera can get out of them. I agree with Peyton Barber. I think he could be sneaky in there, just because flying under the radar, getting some reps, and some crunch and some third down snaps or things like that. He can show what he's got. Thomas Davis, Brady, I agree with you. I think that he's someone of note just from being from Ron Rivera's past, working with him before, knowing his defensive system. I think gives him an edge when it comes to getting some snaps with that first string defense. And then somebody that I noticed that I think could fill that Chris Thompson spot, J.D. McKissick. Hasn't played great, but he's been reliable. Splits out between wide receiver and running back. He plays some very versatile minutes. I think that he hasn't played a lot of snaps. I think if his snaps go up, it gives them another veteran weapon on that offense, which they sorely need.
Yeah, I agree. The other kind of thing I wanted to point out is newly brought in defensive coordinator Jack Del Rio. I love him as a defensive coordinator. I thought he got a bad rap with the Raiders just because he was pretty much fired because Derek Carr got hurt. So I'm excited for him as a defensive coordinator. I love what they did defensively. I think Kendall Fuller and Ronald Darby, the thing that has to be pointed out is they're 2 corners who are going to be cheaper than Josh Norman was, and they're going to give you a higher amount of production, right? Thomas Davis, I think just the culture he's going to bring in contingent or in
the locker room.
Yeah, in the locker room. by already knowing what Ron Rivera is going to want to do, I think is going to be huge for a really young team like this. What hurts me though, and I give it a C minus, what hurts me is you lost your starting left guard and your starting left tackle.
Yeah.
Brandon Sheriff is the only reasonable offensive lineman. They picked up a couple others in free agency, but nobody really of note. So even though Eric Flowers isn't a great left guard, like no doubt about that, he was a lot better this year because he was truly playing his position. He started all games. Go ahead, Skyler.
Who do they call up to be their OC? I can't remember off the top of my head.
I can look it up here. But
I can do it. You keep talking.
No, I got it pulled up here. Scott Turner. Scott Turner. So that's the real issue that I have, is that whole left side of the offensive line is really weak, and whether you're going to start Dwayne Haskins, who's a young quarterback who struggled because of the bad offensive line play, or you're going to start Alex Smith, who is coming off of a busted leg because of bad offensive line play, is really worrisome for me. But I think just between bringing in Ron Rivera and Jack Del Rio, I think that alone really saves this offseason, because it really does signify a culture change and a change to we're going to play smash mouth defense, and you can even see that reflected in the draft. So now let's move on to the draft. The Redskins had 8 picks. Sorry, not the Redskins. Well, technically the Redskins had 8 picks because at that point they were still the Redskins. Round 1, pick number 2 overall, Chase Young, defensive end out of Ohio State. Round 3, they went Antonio Gibson, running back / wide receiver out of Memphis. In the 4th round, they went Sadiq Charles, offensive tackle from LSU. They also picked up Antonio Gandy Golden, wide receiver from Liberty. In the 5th round, they went Keith Ismail, offensive lineman from San Diego State, and Kaliki Hudson, linebacker from Michigan. And then with the 2 7th-round picks, they went Cameron Curl, safety out of Arkansas, and James Smith-Williams, defensive end out of North Carolina State. So how do you guys grade their draft?
I think that the Washington football team did make some pretty good picks in this draft class. Obviously, you got to start with Chase Young. I mean, that's kind of a no-brainer. If they really fucked up that pick, they shouldn't be in charge at all. But Chase Young has been talked about being better than any of the Bosa brothers. So that could really help, this Washington franchise. And I don't know if you guys,
if you're going to team him up with Ryan Kerrigan.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Ryan Kerrigan's a forgotten man on that team. But, yeah, there'll be a lethal pass rushing duo. And I don't know if you guys saw the video of the Washington football practice where Chase Young introduced Adrian Peterson to the ground.
I did. He's looked really good in practice.
Yeah, so if he's
– and the funny thing is he continues to grow. Like, I think he's grown like an inch and a half since they drafted him. Like, he's still a young guy who's growing.
Yeah, so if he's able to play like that in real games, Washington could have a better season than we might think they do. And then I think Antonio Gibson and Antonio Gandy Golding are really going to help this offense just because, how versatile Gibson is. He can play running back. He can play wide receiver. And then Antonio Gandy Golden was a sleeper wide receiver pick. A lot of people were high on him and thought he could produce. And I think they could help. And then those are the players of note for me. The rest, I think really helps them because, they hit positions of need, especially the offensive line, which had holes. They got 2 of them. They hit the linebacking core of the secondary, the pass rushing again, to really shore up that defense. So just because of that, I'll give it a B. Just because I don't know how the rest of the picks are going to pan out, but just with Chase Young, Gibson, and Golding, it gets them all the way up to the B.
Yeah, I had a hard time grading this draft because there was obviously things that I wish that they had done, but I can't fault them for draft picks that they did make. So I gave it like a C+, B-, which is where I go when I don't know what to do with the draft.
Fair.
I like I said, Chase Young is a perennial defensive talent, better than both. Again, from everything we heard from Ohio State, everything we saw in the combine, better than both Bosa brothers, and they guys are insanely talented. And I mean, he wasn't just a pass rusher; he was pretty good in the run game at Ohio State too. So we'll see what he can do. The fact that him and Montrezl Sweat and Ryan Kerrigan are on a defensive line front 7 together is just scary for that run-heavy NFC East. I agree with you guys, Antonio Gibson or at least with Mitch and Antonio Gandy Golden. Much needed versatility on that offense. Some kind of playmakers, hopefully, for this team that desperately needs them. You can't just have one wide receiver doing all the heavy lifting. And then I like that they just built up that offensive line. I like that they just kept going at it, and they kind of didn't give up. They did what Carolina did with defensive players almost. I'm going to see like Ron Rivera just sitting in the war room going, I don't know who to draft here. Give me an offensive lineman, because that's the biggest position of need on this team.
Yeah, I give their draft a B. I actually think it's a really solid draft. Chase Young alone, I think, puts this team in a B draft range, because I think he could easily put up 10 to 12 sacks just this rookie season with the way that he's practicing. Now, granted, he's practicing against, as we've all agreed, a terrible Washington offensive line. But I think that him and Ryan Kerrigan can really work together and put up like Packers Smith Brothers level numbers next year. Antonio Gibson, I loved this kid at Memphis. If you want a prime example, go watch his Cotton Bowl game against Penn State. He plays fantastic. Sadiq Charles and Keith Ismail, I love that they draft big, burly offensive linemen. They can both play the center or the guard position, with the possibility of probably Ismail moving out to tackle if needs be. Antonio Gandy Golden, love this kid. Didn't get a chance to watch much Liberty football because I hate the university, but I thought he played great. 79 catches, nearly 1,400 yards, 10 touchdowns.
6'4", 210. He's a big dude.
He's a big guy who can line up on the outside. So if he can produce even half those numbers on the outside, it then opens up more possibilities for guys like Terry McLaurin, who's a primarily inside wide receiver and slot wide receiver, to get even more open. And that goes back, because remember, Terry McLaurin went to Ohio State with quarterback Dwayne Haskins. So it's just another part to my point of I love it when teams draft a quarterback and a wide receiver that they're familiar with. But the one that really stands out to me, because I watched a lot of Michigan football, was Kaliki Hudson, the linebacker from Michigan. This dude had 101 tackles last year. I thought even on a bad Michigan defense, he played really, really well. 1.5 sacks, 3 passes defensed. I think his ability to possibly learn from guys like Landon Collins and Thomas Davis could mean that he's going to produce really, really high. This grade gets a B for me for Washington solely because they didn't draft any Alabama players, which is what they do every single year. I mean, they had, when HaHa Clinton-Dix was there, they had, I think, 6 guys on their starting defense were Alabama football players. And when you build a team like that, it's just not going to be successful. The other picks, Cameron Curl, James Smith-Williams, take or leave from me. But I honestly think that those first 6 picks they had are really solid. Chase Young alone puts it up as a really good draft, but I think if you can get some solid production from those other guys, then this team is going to look really good a couple of years from now, once those guys are a little bit more experienced.
Well, and another thing to add between Hudson and Young is that they fit what Ron Rivera wants in a linebacker. They're versatile linebackers that can work in both the run and the pass game. That they're not just a one-trick pony, honestly. Like, that's what Luke Kuechly, he wasn't a one-trick pony. He did everything at linebacker. Not saying that one of these guys is the next Luke Kuechly, but that's what he likes in his linebackers.
You're right, but let's also remember, who did Luke Kuechly learn under? Thomas Davis, right?
Exactly.
So that's a big thing too. The thing that with Chase Young that I just want to point out, 16.5 sacks, so he averaged over a sack a game last year, but he had 7 forced fumbles as a defensive end, which is
that was even like
ridiculous.
He had like only 3 sacks in the last like 4 games of the season.
But I mean, even then, he was still dominant. Like, go watch the Big Ten championship game against Wisconsin, and Jonathan Taylor plays really good that first half. Nearly puts up 100 first half rushing yards, and then Chase Young is a huge reason he gets shut down, and Wisconsin unfortunately loses.
No, I'm just saying he had 16.5 sacks, and he had a stretch of games, and he didn't even play in 2 games either.
Yeah,
we had a stretch of games where he just wasn't playing well after his suspension. So it's just like he had 16.5 sacks in really like 8 games. So like
really, yeah,
that's just how scary he is.
So let's rank this Washington team one last time for as we break these down. Where do we put them? In or in need of a rebuild, in or in need of a reload, 8-8 playoff tier or Super Bowl caliber tier team?
I think they need a rebuild. The jury's still out on Dwayne Haskins, whether he truly is the franchise quarterback. And if he's not, then you're out on the search yet again. The offense, they've got some nice pieces in, but the tight end positions has nothing to speak of. The running back position is a bunch of backups and old Hall of Famers. And then the offensive line is, a mess, but they're working on it. And then, the defense is really kind of the saving grace of this team just because of that defensive line. And now the pass rushing duo of Kerrigan and Young, and then having Landon Collins in your secondary. But the defense needs to be retooled before I could consider them possibly getting into the playoffs or possibly making a shot at the NFC East title. So I think they need to rebuild a little bit more.
Yeah, I would say that the team that we all agreed that was the worst last year that did the best this offseason and where they're projected to go was the Cincinnati Bengals. I think we all kind of agree there. I think Washington's a step behind them because what Cincy did with their entire team, Washington did specifically with their defense, which was get veterans on that defense or get young players in on that defense and surround them with veterans in order to prove them. They just haven't really done it on the offensive side of the ball. Once they do that, I see them challenging Dallas and Philadelphia for the NFC East title. But until they're able to do that, this team is rebuilding.
Yeah, I have them in a rebuild. I think it's pretty apparent. I think this team is probably still 1 or 2 seasons away from maybe even being a serious division contender, let alone a playoff contender. Mm-hmm. And part of that is going to go on the development of Dwayne Haskins. But what this team benefits from is that if Dwayne Haskins struggles, you got a guy in Alex Smith who's a proven quarterback who was 6-2 with the Redskins before he got hurt. Yeah. So if he's cleared medically to play, Dwayne Haskins, the team is going to improve from that because they could put him in. But Dwayne Haskins is going to improve from that because he's finally going to get a veteran to teach him how to play quarterback. And let's not forget the last guy that Alex Smith taught how to play quarterback just won a Super Bowl with Kansas City. Yeah. So there's a lot of improvement here, or a lot of ability to improve here. So let's go into team season predictions. I have the Redskins, or the team formerly known as the Redskins, going 5-11. I think that this team is going to build a little bit. I think this team is going to dominate the Giants. I think they're going to play really well against the Giants. I think they have the ability. There's a couple of games on here that are very winnable for them. I'd say the Rams is one of them because while they would have to figure out how to block Aaron Donald, the Rams have to figure out how to block multiple guys for the Redskins defense, and the Rams offensive line looks really bad. I think the Detroit game is very winnable. I think the Cincinnati game is very winnable. And I think the Carolina game is very winnable. So I have this team going 5-11, and I think a large part of it is Ron Rivera is going to get this team on the right track to where when they're competitive in a game, they're going to figure out a couple more times to close it out. But they're still going to get dominated by the Eagles and by the Cowboys and by the Ravens and the Steelers and a couple other teams that they have to play.
So my initial record for the Washington football team is 2-14, and it was that low just because of the information I had at the time. But now that it looks like Alex Smith could potentially be quarterbacking, I think my record would reflect more like you because I think Alex Smith could get a little more wins than Dwayne Haskins could.
Sure,
but they're still in the bottom cellar of the division and the NFC in general. Maybe they'll win a trap game here or there, but I think they'll lose most games that they're expected to lose.
So you got them at 5-11 also?
Yeah, now that I know that Alex Smith could potentially play quarterback for them if Dwayne Haskins struggles, then I'll agree with you. I could see them easily doing that.
Okay, fair.
I like last week since last episode, since I put all of my season together, things have changed drastically with Alex Smith coming in and stuff like that. So originally I had them going through 3-13. I'm going to stick by that just because I think that there are some games in there where, depending on who's at quarterback, depending on what happens, it could be a win or loss. I agree with Brady. I think Detroit and Cincinnati are winnable games. I think that they could edge out some games against LA. It was looking at when before Alex Smith got back and was medically cleared. It was just like, well, which quarterback am I trusting? Am I trusting Dwayne Haskins or Jared Goff? And it wasn't just Jared Goff. It was Jared Goff and Sean McVay.
Yeah.
Who am I? Matthew Stafford, Joe Burrow. Like I'm going to trust those quarterbacks over Dwayne Haskins, because it was or Kyle Allen, because everybody else that knew the system is gone.
Yeah.
Colt McCoy and Case Keenum are both left, which is weird to think of Colt McCoy not being a Redskin or a Washington football team player. So it's I agree with Brady. I agree with Mitch. I think that this team has the potential to maybe stir some things up in the NFC East, maybe be contending there in the middle of the season, because it's the middle of the season that's a little bit easier for them. But the one thing I really want is for Ron Rivera to win against Carolina. That's the one where I'm like, he has to win this one.
Sure.
I want him to stick it to Carolina, because it was not his fault that they did as bad as they did. It wasn't. So I want him to beat Carolina.
Yeah, and the one thing that I would like to say about this schedule is that for Washington, it's brutal, right? Like you have to play Pittsburgh, you have to play the AFC East, you have to play the NFC East, you have to play Baltimore. Like it's a brutal schedule. You have to play Seattle and I think San Francisco. Like,
yeah, you have to play that. You have to play like the toughest divisions in football.
It's a brutal schedule, but I think with Ron Rivera, what he's going to be able to do is say, all right, guys, we're going to go out, put our best effort, and use this really tough schedule to harden ourselves and to make ourselves a better football team for next year. And so I think year 2 of the Ron Rivera experiment could be really good in Washington. So now let's move on here to our hero and our putts. So our hero of the episode is a player, a coach, a moment that is really awesome that we just like to highlight. Mine, I did not have one walking into this episode and was totally just going to make one up. And then the man himself, Mr. Andy Reid, came in and saved the day. Andy Reid stated that he plans to wear the Super Bowl ring on special occasions or when he wants a free cheeseburger. Andy Reid has always been one of my favorite people on earth, the Hawaiian shirts to everything. After winning the Super Bowl, him saying that he was going to take the trophy and then go eat the biggest burger that he could find. I think he's a great person. He just embodies fat man pride that I agree with, like so intrinsically. So I love Andy Reid. Congrats on him for winning the Super Bowl, and I hope that places are going to give him a free cheeseburger if he brings in the Super Bowl ring.
All right, so for my hero this week, I'm choosing myself. I'm choosing myself is because I was texted a request, and that request was that adult star Mia Khalifa said that the number one reason she's attracted to a guy is lasting long enough to pleasure Mitchell, satisfy her. So this will be my last episode with the guys. I have a new task in life. I want to wish you all well.
Usually I don't let you. I wouldn't let you pick yourself, but in that situation, I'll relent and I'll let you pick yourself because that was just so funny. So that was so funny to see.
What the fuck does that have to do with sports? But anyway, it's hilarious.
It doesn't.
Because I'm the host of a sports podcast.
There you go. He worked his way around it. He did. I
have to give it to. Yep, he did. I have to give it to.
I picked Brady one week for his stupid Kobe is in the top 10 thing.
Yep,
so.
Yeah, but then you had another putt.
Yeah, that's fair. But no, I respect Mitch, and he also had to pick himself because I stole Andy Reid from him. So,
yeah.
Mitch, you can have Mia Khalifa. I'm going to take the embodiment of sexiness, which is Andy Reid, and I think that we'll both be happy with the result. So, Skylar, who is your hero?
I am going with Jaylen Brown. The guy's been just knocking it out of the park, both in the bubble and as an activist. But the thing I love most about him was when he was in the players' meetings. He looked at all of them and goes, "Okay, if we suspend the season, what are you gonna do? Are you just gonna go home and just sit there, or are you gonna go out? Are you gonna protest? Are you going to use your money? Are you gonna put your money where your mouth is? Are you gonna do those things? Because if you're not, we might as well just stay here." And he goes, "I'm a 23-year-old kid. I don't know all the answers." Just like that humility, the understanding, and calling guys out on whether or not they were actually going to protest and actually going to put their money where their mouth is, whether they were actually going to do these things. He was good. For a 23-year-old kid to look at the rest of the league and ask them those questions and then admit that he doesn't have all the answers, like that's some selfish. That's some selfishness.
Yeah.
Selflessness. That's putting selflessness. That's putting the cause, that social justice that NBA players have been asking for, above his job, above his respect with other players in the league. So I have to give it to him.
Yeah, taking notes, LeBron.
Yeah, right, exactly. So now let's move on to our putts. Our putts is the exact opposite of our hero. This is a player, a league, a coach, whatever, anybody in sports who did something dumb. So mine goes to Mitch for not being able to satisfy me. No. Mine goes to the NBA, and it's because it came out that after Trevor Ariza, the forward for the Blazers, had his son returned to him in North Carolina, he contacted the NBA and said, "What can I do to join the bubble?" Now, if my timeline is correct, this was just after Game 2 of the opening round against the Lakers, and the NBA told him, "No, you can't come back," which is ridiculous, because if you're going to allow guys to leave for the birth of a child and come back, if you're going to allow guys to leave for medical care with the possibility of coming back like Sabonis did with the Pacers, but you're not going to allow a guy who had his son return to him join, the whole reason he sat out wasn't because of COVID. It was because of his kid, the same way that Mike Conley left the bubble for the birth of his kid, the same way that Gordon Hayward is out of the bubble right now, both for an injury and the birth of his kid, I think is ridiculous. And I think it just goes to show a lot of that very brief one-sidedness we get from the NBA, which is that they didn't want to see Portland stand a chance against the Lakers.
Yep.
And because Trevor Ariza would have been the guy to go up against LeBron, and he's done it in the past and played LeBron pretty well. So my putts is the NBA for being so contradictory there and not allowing Trevor Ariza to come join the bubble. Even if it was just for Game 5, that would have then given opportunity for a guy like Damian Lillard to come back and we have a series again. So that's just ridiculous by the NBA.
Yeah, you're totally right. I agree with your analysis of everything. I mean, shit, before even the bubble started or whatever, they came out and said, like, yeah, we want to get Zion in these playoffs.
Yeah.
So, and now they're, making sure
But at least
players can't come. So LeBron has an easy path to going to the finals, or at least they just want to see a conference finals between Lakers Clippers, honestly.
But at least the NBA is honest about it. Like, at least they're just like, yeah, you know what, we fucked up, or we're blatantly trying to fix this so we get what we want, and then they fail anyways. Like, at least they're honest about it. So
Yeah,
can
and
you do
then
that for the Bucks, please?
yeah, right. And then on top of that, like reports of with both Kristaps Porzingis and Damian Lillard, the NBA, this is not for sure yet. There's been nothing that's come out for sure, but reports of them going to the team doctors and saying that, well, those guys need to see specialists outside of the bubble, which is why they had to leave. So again, just if it is true, forcing teams like the Clippers and the Lakers to have an easier go so that they can face each other in the conference finals is ridiculous, and that's a massive shame on the NBA. Mitch, your putts.
Oh, okay. So I'm going to stay within the NBA realm, and my putts is Luka. I don't know if you guys noticed, but at the end of the first quarter of the last game, Luka was drinking something, and I'm like 99% sure he was drinking piss out of a water bottle.
It was pickle juice. It was pickle juice.
Piss. He's drinking piss, man. That's why he's a putts. He was drinking fucking piss. If he drank anything else, maybe he would have upset the Clippers. But no, he decides to drink his own urine. I hope so. It's his own urine. Maybe it's Boban's. We don't know. But he's a putts for drinking piss.
That's ridiculous, Mitch. I'm glad this is your last episode. Skylar.
my actual putts is Mitch.
Okay.
I was unsure about it, but after that, now it really is. Specifically for acting all high and mighty when the Thunder came back, and was it the Thunder or the Nuggets that came back and won?
I did it with both.
That came back and won because if you go back and listen, both me and Brady were like, well, this game could go 7. Like, we're like, this is very possible. We've been playing close. We've been proven wrong before. Totally admitting the fact that we don't know everything about NBA basketball or playoff basketball. And in our group chat after the Nuggets win, Mitch blows it up going, I told you guys, you were fucking wrong. And I love you, Mitch. You're amazing. It's great. I hope you and Mia Khalifa have a wonderful time together. And then just to back it up with an actual putts, just Marcus Morris for being a twat. So
There you go. Fair. So we were hoping to get this episode done in time for Jazz Nuggets to be finalized, but it's not right now. 5 minutes left in the game. We're tied at 70 right now. So, Skylar, if the Nuggets win, you've just left yourself open to being Mitch's putts for the next episode.
It's okay. I'm fine with that.
So with that, boys, before I do just a brief wrap-up, is there anything else you guys wanted to touch on?
Quick
Yeah.
stall.
Yeah, just two little breaking news things. I'll start with the serious one first. Ian Rappaport tweeted during the episode that after a wild few hours, all is quiet on the Kamara front. I'm told cooler heads have prevailed, and the Saints and Kamara's camp will keep working on a deal. He's expected to be at practice tomorrow. So it looks like he'll be seen in New Orleans.
Cool. In-episode update, so now we're just going to scrap this and just re-record it completely. Thanks, Mitch.
Somebody call TJ.
Somebody call, yeah.
All
TJ,
right,
wake up.
And on a happier note, at the Super Bowl ring ceremony, Patrick Mahomes proposed to his girlfriend.
Was his knee all the way down?
They did not show the actual thing, but
Okay, because he could be running a fake.
But I think he used a big chunk of that new extension toward that ring.
Yeah, he's used that money. He bought a car. Didn't he buy a portion of a sports franchise?
Yeah, he now is a part owner of the Royals.
Yeah, so the dude is just he's spending left and right, but he's doing it smart. I'm mad props to him.
He's investing. He's investing.
He's investing. He's expanding his portfolio.
Exactly. I was gonna say something and then I got too carried away with.
Could you talk about the fantasy league?
Yeah. Okay. So somebody left the fantasy league. So
Fuck
we.
you.
Yeah. No. It's okay. It's
Literally.
fine. No. Save it for Mia. It's we have 5 people now. I reset it back down to 6 just in case because we have 8 days until the fantasy league. Boys, share it on your profiles. People, you got 8 days. Or you know what? By the time Brady puts this out, it might be done by then. Who knows? But again, September 9th, 8 p.m. is when we're doing it. Where we might record our draft. We don't know yet. But it's a great way to show that you are better than us at football. You know better.
Not if you pick Joe Burrow in the first round. Then out of the fucking league.
Brady, rock paper scissors. Who gets Joe Burrow in the first round?
No, I'm going. No. I'm not telling you I'm drafting. So yes, we'll keep an eye on that. We'll get all that stuff posted. We'll get all the episodes posted. There's just been some hiccups with that, so that's on my end. I'll get everything posted up there. We appreciate everybody for tuning in and for listening on YouTube. Follow us on everything: YouTube, Spotify, SoundCloud, Reddit, Facebook, Twitter. Email us fourthstringsp@gmail.com. We only planned the first 34 episodes to cover the schedule breakdown and all 32 teams, and now we don't know what to do. So next episode, we're going to be talking about NBA playoffs again. We're going to be talking about the possibility of college football returning. We are getting college football this week. We had one game, I think, on Thursday or something.
Austin Peay versus
Central Arkansas. But we have actual FBS games that are going to be played this week. And then we have college football that's starting up soon. We're probably going to do some conference previews for the 3 big ones. And then we have the NFL season that starts not this Thursday, but next Thursday. Basketball's heating up. Baseball, we're at about the halfway point of the season right now. So we'll start to talk about them a little bit more. But we appreciate everybody for tuning in. Follow us on everything. Like, subscribe, email us, join the Fantasy League, the whole 9 yards. We love everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. And thanks for listening to episode 34 of the Fourth String Sports Podcast.